In this video, I'm going to cover the different shell types used in Naval. While ships mostly use the same shell types as tanks, the meta of Naval is much different, so these shells fit different roles. As always, there are exceptions to which shell types to bring depending on the ship in question, but this is a general outline of how effective they are. First comes your bog standard high explosive ammunition. Most ships with large cannons and war thunder come with this shell stock. HE generally has the highest amount of explosive filler of any shell type, giving it a large splash radius and high damage to whatever it hits. The shell is effective at all ranges as all of the damage comes from the explosive filler rather than having to penetrate the target to deal full damage. High explosive shells instantly detonate upon hitting a target, dealing external damage rather than internal. High explosive is the best shell for most situations, and especially against soft targets with low armor. With the highest raw damage of any shell, this should make up the majority of your ammunition on most vessels. The exception would be vehicles with exceptionally weak HE for their gun caliber, such as the IJN Suzuya. Next comes high explosive base fuse, which is very similar to the previous HE shell. HE base fuse shells have the same high damage of HE shells, but rather than detonating on the surface of a target, these shells penetrate slightly into it before exploding to deal more internal damage. Some HE base fuse shells have less explosive filler than their standard HE counterparts, such as those on the German 127mm cannon, making them worse. Other HE base fuse shells have the exact same amount as the HE shells, such as those on the German 105mm cannon, making them a direct upgrade. I would recommend bringing HE base fuse over standard HE if the explosive filler is the same, but ignoring them if they have significantly less filler, as the extra penetration won't make up for the lost damage. The best mix of penetration and explosive filler is the semi-armor piercing shell. These are also called common or SP common on American ships, with common having more explosive filler and SP common having more penetration. Compared to HE and HE base fuse shells, SAP shells have a higher penetration and a longer fuse delay, making them detonate much further into a target. They have less explosive filler than HE and less penetration than AP, making them a middle-of-the-road shell. I would recommend bringing some SAP ammunition on ships which have it, as it's the best shell for destroying ammunition racks or for fighting cruisers and destroyers. I wouldn't recommend using it as your primary ammunition though, as the higher explosive filler of high explosive ammunition will be more effective in most cases. For a full focus on armor penetration, the armor-piercing shell is the best shell that ships have. There are a few variants, AP, APC, and APCBC, but most of the shells in-game are APCBC. These have the highest penetration of any shell type, but lose most of their explosive filler, making them a precision weapon. When using AP, aim directly for ammunition racks. If you aren't hitting the enemy's ammo, this shell will be dealing much less damage than high explosive or semi-armor piercing. AP is the best shell for knocking out large or heavily armored ships where the SAP may not pen through to the ammunition, such as against Admiral Hippers or Sverdlovs. I'd recommend SAP over AP in most cases, but it could be worth bringing a few for longer range engagements where SAP loses most of its penetration power. Next come the two airburst rounds, high explosive distance fuse and high explosive variable timed fuse. The HE distance fuse shells can shoot down planes by detonating in the air near them. The detonation timer is set when the shell is fired from the cannon, with this distance being determined by crew skills. They also airburst against ships, meaning if you accidentally take these rather than HE, you'll struggle to deal any damage to surface ships at all. These shells are better than direct firing high explosive at aircraft, but have pretty poor accuracy due to the fuse, even with high crew skills. I can't recommend bringing these for primary cannons, but for secondary cannons they can make an effective deterrent to aircraft. High explosive variable timed fuse shells also airburst against planes, but have a magnetic detonator instead, causing them to automatically explode after reaching a certain distance from the aircraft. This distance is listed in the stat card of the shell. These ensure that the shells will never miss from an improperly set fuse, giving them a much better hit ratio. They also don't airburst against surface targets, so they can be used freely in place of standard HE. Variable timed fuse shells are far better against aircraft than timed distance fuse shells, and it's worth bringing a few of them for every gun that has them. On some ships, such as the PR-35, the HEVT shells have more filler than standard HE shells, making them a direct upgrade against all targets. The last shell I'll mention is Shrapnel, which is pretty uncommon. Only a few Russian and British ships have them. Shrapnel shells seem to have less explosive filler and penetration than standard HE shells without an upside, and throughout testing them I wasn't able to find a situation in which they perform better than any standard shells. I've heard that some function as anti-air shells, but I haven't been able to get them to fuse against aircraft in test drives, so I'm going to assume that that isn't working currently. Generally, they're not worth taking and should be ignored in favor of other shell types. Thank you for watching. If there are any other naval topics or mechanics I should cover, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe too.